$161 million in claims for OAS after land acquisition delays. The National Infrastructure Development Company, NIDCO, had to pay embattled Brazilian firm, Construtora OAS, $161 million in work stoppage claims, as the land acquisition for the Solomon-Hochoy Highway extension to Point Fortin project was incomplete at the time. During yesterday's sitting of the Joint Select Committee, JSC, on Land and Physical Infrastructure, NIDCO Chairman Herbert George said included in that figure was $26 million for work stoppages caused by community protests during the construction. The sitting was the JSC's second session on an inquiry into the 2023 NIDCO report on the saga of the Solomon-Hochoy Highway extension to Point Fortin project from 2010 to 2023. An account of the development and execution of the largest infrastructure development project implemented in TNT. JSC members Kennedy Richards Jr., Anil Roberts, and Barry Paterath were absent from the session. Responding to JSC Chairman Diorub Timel's question on whether NIDCO overpaid OAS for the project, George said NIDCO treated the contractor well, as it legitimately received a lot of money for reasons the state company should avoid going forward. OAS was paid lots of money for which we did not get productive work in claims that a contractor can make, given the circumstances. We need to manage that as we go forward. We must not start these jobs too early. We must look at the land acquisition aspect of it and let it proceed for some time before we start the actual construction work, George said. With $500 million spent on land acquisition, the government engaged in private treaty negotiations with property owners along the right-of-way. But even after compensating property owners, George said, it took time for some to vacate the premises. In some cases, residents were not ready to leave or had nowhere to go. NIDCO decided to pay for 6 months of rental accommodation for those who qualified, but in some cases, they prolonged it to between 12 and 18 months. While some people received leases to properties in Petit Morne, St. Madeleine, and Cedar Hill, Prince's Town, they had to wait for the state to develop the land. Responding to JSC member Simon de Nebriga on whether there were concerns about the land acquisition raised before the contract agreement, George said there was a recognition that the government could not provide the entire site at the commencement of the project. It told the contractor it could have Golconda to DB immediately, while the Gatineau River to Mont Desir would follow months later. He said this was too optimistic when the aim required moving hundreds of people. That was just optimism speaking without any basis because that has not happened before, and with the number of people you are moving, you cannot do it overnight. Nobody is there waiting for you to come and offer them compensation, so they will move. People told you, I have been here for so many years. My navel string cut their dot. George said there were many oil wells to cap along the row, which was not in the contractor's scope of work. He said Petrotrin had to get this done, and despite applying and paying for the capping, contractors took a long time to complete the job. In the early construction period, several protests over the highway caused work to shut down. There were also $9 million paid to OAS for price escalation, another contentious issue. George said NIDCO's upfront payment to OAS was huge, even above the 10% initially offered during the tender process. Documents found at NIDCO showed a cabinet instruction to increase the advance payment at OAS request. George said the upfront payment was not tied to work done, as opposed to using a contractor who would have taken a smaller advance payment and collected the remainder over the construction period. While he did not condemn this agreement, he said it eventually led to NIDCO paying a large chunk of the contract sum. When NIDCO terminated the contractor in 2016, the payment did not reflect the percentage of work done. Among the issues discussed was a lack of documentation supporting various decisions at NIDCO during the early phase of the project, with the board deemed as having to rubber stamp decisions already taken by others. It included permission for OAS to mobilize on-site before getting its letter of intent to commence work and even submitting claims for price escalation before the allotted period. George agreed with JSC member Renuka Sagramsing Suklal that it appeared OAS had a powerful enabler, allowing it special privileges to bypass standard procedures. He said part of NIDCO might not have been party to the enabling team and did not believe it was the then board of directors. He said members were very hard-nosed to call for due diligence,